Okay. So I am recording. All right. So it is Thursday the 9th. So lab 2 is at least, I'll say, nominally due. So my due dates are usually just to keep you on a schedule and not to like start applying late penalties or anything like that. That comes closer to the exam. Okay, so I had somebody in the morning session who had not set up Android Studio yet. And if you were if your intention was to sort of work in the student labs, and then that was sort of blown up this week, should eventually install, if you can, on your machines at home, because we don't know if this is going to happen again. But if you were, if you didn't finish lab 2 because you expected to finish it in the lab and then didn't get the opportunity to, that's fine. Turn it in Monday or Tuesday. That's perfectly fine. For lab 2, screen captures are fine. So there was, what was there? There was, you had the questions and the answers to the questions, and then the sort of concatenation. So show me the concatenation, show me maybe the toast, the log, show me some of the things. If you miss something, that's fine, because what I probably should have you sending code, but I didn't sort of, I spent more time trying to show you how to send me code after lab 3. So starting with lab 3, I want you to send me code, but lab 2, if you want to send me code, that's fine. But if you want to send me screen captures, also fine. And just try to capture most of the things. If you don't capture everything, it's not a big deal.
Can we post like the code to like GitHub and just send you a link to the repository?
We can try that. If I have too much trouble with it, then I'll gripe. But what I had, somebody was, it was a while ago, and it was when Kotlin was new. Somebody was putting all their stuff on GitHub, and I was getting other students turning in copies of it. So just
I think I can make like a shared access link and just send you that. It's like only you could see it.
GitHub is sort of fine. Just don't announce to your classmates like here's my link, because what they're going to do is copy. So like it's a legitimate way of sharing code, especially for an up and coming coder who wants people to know he's there. So it's like a legit thing. If it's easy for me to go there and get it, then fine. If not, I'll ask you to zip things up.
Yep.
And just my experience in the past with students putting stuff on GitHub was that other students were finding it, and that can be an issue. It's not so much, I don't blame the person putting it on GitHub, because I figure that's not their purpose in putting it on GitHub, but it is a consequence of putting it on GitHub. Anyway, okay. So there we go.
Okay.
Just telling you my nightmare experiences from the past. And anything else? Installation. Okay, so you should, in case this happens again where we end up at home, you should have something installed at home. You should have you probably need Java installed on your computer. You may not have that. Java is a requirement for this course, but having Java on your computer is not a requirement for this course. So you may need to put Java on your computer, and that's run. The standard place for you to get Java, the JRE, the Java runtime environment, is Oracle, and the install's not hard, but the download from Oracle is hard because they want, the name of your firstborn. They want to know, they want a username, they want an email, they want a very strong password. They rejected mine, I don't know, 5-6 times. It was very annoying. And if you have Java, then you need to do the download for your type of machine. And then you may also need to allow virtualization. If you're going to use an AVD, an Android virtual device, then you need to allow virtualization. And that is some setting typically in the BIOS. And 80% of doing that is the same for everybody. One, it's not easy to sort of show because it's a very low level thing going into the BIOS and setting a setting. So it's not an easy thing where you can sort of show screen captures. But there are people on YouTube who are sort of using like a camera and videotape themselves doing it. So you can find instructions. But the very earliest instruction can vary depending on the make of your computer. So you want to if you need to go into the BIOS and set that setting, you often need to sort of say, okay, I have this kind of a computer, I have, this kind of HP computer, and I'm trying to do the BIOS virtualization setting. Because it's often you're restarting and hitting some key, and it may be delete on your computer, it may be F10 on your computer. That's the part that is sort of dependent on the particular computer. So you might be perfectly following a perfectly valid set of instructions, but not the right instructions for your machine. So just pay attention to that. Okay, so that's about lab 2. Screen capture's fine. GitHub, I'll see if I can make it work on my end, but it's a perfectly legitimate thing for you to do. You should have the installation at home in case we end up at home again. But if you don't have it at home and you're worried about lab 2 being late, don't worry about it. No late penalty in general on my things until we're sort of getting close to a test, which we're not. Any questions? All right, so in Unit 3, Lab 3, we did we talked about radio buttons, and so today I'm going to continue on with a few more things about radio buttons and then move on to the next thing, which is called a spinner. Okay, so I'm going to just show you the code for this, and then I think I will build the next project from the files, but this one I'll probably just not build, but just sort of show you. Okay, so this is more on radio buttons. Radio buttons are, you have a set of choices of which it's possible that none of the choices were chosen, at least initially. And then once the user chooses one, or if one is pre-selected, then it will always be the case. Once one is chosen, then only one will be chosen. So it's either 0 or 1. And once it's 1, it stays 1. Although there is a way to clear it, which is one of the things I'm going to show you. In this example, I'm going to have 2 radio groups. I'm going to allow you to choose a day Monday through Friday, and I'm going to allow you to choose some times. Let's say we're making some kind of appointment or something. So here I'm looking at the interface of the active_main XML. I have a radio group. Remember that we are in a constraint layout, that we must establish a horizontal and vertical constraint for everything, a sort of a top and a left typically is what I do. Sometimes it says start and sometimes it says left. Sort of drives me a little bit crazy as it jumps back and forth. Okay. But within radio buttons, within a radio group, you have to constrain the group, but you don't have to constrain the things inside the group. The things inside the group are typically arranged vertically, although you can set a property of the radio group. I think it's maybe called the orientation or layout orientation or something, and then you can get them to go horizontally. Okay, so the radio group serves two purposes. It's the thing that must be constrained, and the things within it don't have to be constrained, but it also says, here's the set of choices of which you can choose one and only one. I have inside my radio group, I have a text view. So that's going to serve as the sort of label for the group, and I'm labeling it as the days of the week. And now it would be possible to put the text outside of the radio group or to put it inside the radio group. If I put it inside the radio group, I don't have to constrain it because I don't have to constrain things in the radio group. And also, if I move around the radio group, this obviously is on the inside of it and moves along with it. So that's sort of an advantage of putting the text view inside the radio group. If you are going to at any stage loop over the things in the radio group and with the assumption that they're all radio buttons, you have to sort of pay attention to the fact that you have one thing that's in the radio group that's not a radio button, this text view. So if you had some loop, you might have to say, I'm looping over the things in my radio group, and but this one particular thing is not a radio button. So you might have to look at their types or something like that. A lot of the stuff you have to do with radio buttons is handled by the radio group itself. But there may be times that you want to do some looping or pick out a particular radio button within the group. And if you're going to put the text view in there, you just have to be aware that you did that and that there is something in the radio group that's not a radio button. Okay. So then here's the radio button for Monday. I gave that one a tag. That was the only one I gave a tag. So I'm not going to use the tag, but I could use the tag. The tag is, I always call it the secret compartment. It's the thing that the user doesn't see, but you have access to as a coder. It can be a simple thing. Sometimes I'll put in here delimiters, and so I will sort of allow myself to put multiple things in the tag because I can sort of have some string in there with the delimiter and then parse on the delimiter and sort of break it up into pieces. So it's a place for me to put one thing, if I'm clever, multiple things, and it's a behind the scenes type of a thing. Here's my radio button for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And again, they don't need any constraints, even though I'm in a constraint layout, because they're within the radio group, but it's only the radio group that must be constrained. Within the radio group, we are working basically with what is known as a vertical layout. In a vertical layout, everything in the layout is arranged vertically. So there's an assumption that a radio group is a vertical layout. You can change one property of it and turn it into a horizontal layout. Here's my second radio group. Remember that a radio group, I think we pointed out the last time, a radio group is a kind of container and has an open and a close, whereas the radio button is a singleton. Okay, here's my second radio group. It is for the times. the radio group is constrained. Here's the left constraint, and here's the top constraint. I made the left of this group to the right of the previous group. So there'll be those two groups. The choices within the group are going to go down, but the two groups will be next to each other. That was decided by this. Okay, so here's this other group. For the times, I also put inside that group a label for the time of day. So I'm again working with, so you can have the labels outside of the group or inside of the group, pluses and minuses each way. Here's my radio button for 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10, 11, and 12. And if I had, and I could again have, I could have a tag, and maybe the tag, maybe if I had afternoon times, maybe my tags would be like military time. So if I had like this class 3:30, then I could make that, what is it, 15:30 or something like that. So the tag is again the hidden thing that I can use, and it's convenient for me to use behind the scenes. That radio group ends. Here's my button to say I'm going to enter this user's choice of information, and it is its left is in the parent. So the parent is the container, and this button's container is the constraint layout. So this is saying I'm just on the edge of the layout with maybe a little bit of a margin, and then I'm under the day radio group. And then I have another button for clearing, and it's under the time radio group. So it's constrained to the radio group. So it's sort of underneath the radio group. And that is, so it's two radio groups that are next to each other and two buttons that are under the radio groups. And I chose, I think, 5 days and 5 times. So these radio groups vertically take the same amount of space, though they didn't have to. Okay. So now I'm going over to activity. Any question about the design before I go over to the activity, to the main activity, to the code? Okay, I have my imports. I have no place to display the answer on the interface. I'm just toasting the results. So I'm just going to toast, you chose Monday at 8 o'clock. Okay. Again, I never type these things. I always get the system to type it for me. On a rare occasion, I will type an import, but usually not. This was typed for me. Here's something I typed. My connection from the interface to the code version of the button for entering, the connection between the interface and the code for the clearing button, and for the radio group for the days and the radio groups for the time. Okay, this is almost always how the beginning of our code looks. Sometimes there are some other generic declarations up here as well. Here's the button enter. When they click the button enter, I want to grab the chosen day, the chosen time, and display them. I'm displaying them in a toast just to make my life easy in this case. So I go to the radio group and I ask for its ID, and I go to the radio group for the times and ask for its ID. And remember, they're working in that scheme where if you don't find something, if none of the radio buttons were selected, then you'll get a -1. So we're saying here, if we got a -1 for the day, or if we got a -1 for the time, then we're going to say you missed making a choice. So choose a day and a time, and then we're getting out. And then otherwise, they made the choices, and I'm going to get their answers.
And I have tacos, but could you just put them in the microwave?
Ew. I'm not putting them things in a microwave. That's nasty.
Oh my God, shut up. All right. There we go. Okay. So so we asked if they didn't choose one or they didn't choose the other, we yell. And we get to the else if they made two choices. If I wanted to invert this, if I wanted the if to be that they made good choices and the else to be my yelling at them to make a choice, if I wanted to invert this condition, I'm just reminding you of when you invert an ORed condition. So if I wanted to turn these into not equal to 1 and not equal to 1, I would also turn the or into an and. That's De Morgan's theorem. So if I am inverting something that would be ORed, I end up with an and. Okay, so, but I made my life easy, and I said if it was bad or bad, I yelled, and then otherwise it was good. And I get the day and I get the time. These are, I'm getting from the ID, I'm getting the radio button, and then I'm using the text of the radio button in my toasts. And I have 3 toasts here. One just obnoxiously says hi, the other one shows me the day, the other one shows me the time. And I'm just showing you this various things you might use for the context. Remember, that's a thing that can sort of trip you up in toasts and some other things where they want a context. And I usually work with this, but it doesn't always work. And if it doesn't work, you might try application context. And another thing to possibly try is space context. So different things to try, different contexts to work with in case your toast doesn't work. Another standard problem with toast is to forget the dot show. Could be perfectly valid, but if you don't show it, it doesn't work. And then it always has 3 options: the context, what it is, the message you want to display, and some amount of time. So I usually use the short and the long and the short constants that are sort of predefined, but you can sort of put your own numbers in here if you want. Okay. Here is the clearing button. And so clearing is easy because they give you a built-in clear. And so it belongs to the radio group, and you just say clear the checks. So if the user had come along at some point and made a choice, and then I want to get rid of all the choices and just have the no radio buttons checked, then I do these clear. And I often will throw a thing like that into a test, clear out the check radio button or something like that. So it's like, if you remember this thing exists, then it's sort of easy free points. I teach 2 sections. Of course, I can't remember who asked me. Probably somebody from the other class. The other class is bigger. You know, can I copy code or should I copy code? In the XML, in the activity XML, I tend not to, because unless it's like almost exactly the same format, it's hard to sort of squeeze something into the middle because of it. I'm always constraining one thing to the next thing to the next thing. If you are trying to like squeeze something in the middle of them, it can throw off the constraining. But code, I'm always copying code. You know, I have to change the names to make it work in the right the context of this program. But I'm often copying code. These things have certain. The button click is easy because there's only one. But when these things have sort of two or 3 methods that you're responsible for, it can get complicated and it's easy to forget one. So I'm usually copying code and then gutting it, changing what it does. Okay, that was the button clear. This code is it's not in any event other than the onCreate. So I could have put this code way at the top. I don't know why I put it way at the bottom, but I did. And this is pre-selecting one of the radio buttons. So I'm doing that in code, not in design. And remember that I have a radio group called day. Remember that there is a text view in there. So that is probably the first thing. That's probably the 0 thing. So I'm getting the child at 1, which is probably the first radio button, but the second view or the second child, a chat. Does clear check method work with everything like text views or edit text? I don't think they would call it check. For edit texts, I would usually just set the text to quote. And same thing for text views. They may have a clear, but I would, they might have some kind of clear. It would not be called check. But I have a tendency just to use the set text method and set it to quote, but they could have a clear.
Are those radio buttons stored as trees?
The radio buttons, everything in XML is a tree.
Okay.
It's like HTML. Everything's a tree, and they belong to the radio group. So they're a child of the radio group, and the radio group is a child of the constraint.
Okay, great.
And so we'll be doing more child stuff later, parent-child stuff later. And that's a way to go down in the tree and up in the tree. So here I am picking the child with an index of 1, which is the second thing, but the first radio button, and that I think that is Monday. And then I'm setting its checked property to true, so I'm choosing it. And then the same thing here for the time, so choosing 8 o'clock. Questions? All right, so now I'm going to go on to the spinner. And this one I'm going to build, so let me start up Android Studio first. Okay, and let me go get the spinner and download the spinner and extract the spinner. And I'm going to bring these all open into Notepad++. Okay, and take you down. So here is I'm going to make a new thing. I'm going to call it an empty. I'm going to call it spinner demo 2. And what did I do? So I have stake demo. That's the old one. And this one I called stake was the stake is what it's the subject, and spinner is the thing I'm showing you. Okay, so I want to make the design, which is the layout, which is under res for resources, the layout activity main. Here's the code, and I'm going to, I think that's the old stuff. Here's the Control A, Control C. I'm copying the activity main that I got from Canvas, and I'm going to paste that in here, Control D. Okay. Then I'm going to go to main activity. So this is the stuff that you're supposed to know and love. And go over to the main activity. And I don't copy, I'm not going to copy the package. Now let me come up from the bottom. I'm going to come up, but not do the package. Same thing here, everything but the package. Okay, and I have one more thing this time. It's complaining, and it's complaining because I have one more thing that I haven't done yet. So you can see it complaining. Here's all this red squiggly stuff. And I'm going to have, instead of getting my choices now from a radio button, I'm going to get them from this thing called a spinner, which is, if we were in JavaScript, we would call it a drop-down select. We'd call it a select. And I'm going to get my options in two different ways. And one of the ways I'm going to get them is from an array that I establish in values strings XML. So in our resources, so far, the only resource we played with is the layout resource. Now we're going to play with another resource, the strings XML resource. And when I name my spinner demo 2, that becomes one of my string resources, but I'm going to add another resource, an array resource, and that's here in this strings XML. I'm going to copy just this array part of it. And I want to put that again. I'm in resources, I'm in values, I'm in strings. That's a file that was already there, and I'm just adding to that file. I have an open string array and a closed string array. I give it a name, and then I have within there, I have open items and closed items, and then I have my strings. So this is an XML version of an array of strings. It's in the strings.xml, which is in values, which is in resources. Are we okay? Do we have any questions? So I did the usual copying of the activity main. I did my usual copying of main activity, but not the package. And then I had a new one, which was a resource values strings XML. And I left, this one was already there, and I left it, and then I added this string array. Okay, in activity main, let's see what, let me run it. I think I don't have any errors at this stage. So it's going to be, I'm going to have two drop downs. I'm going to cook a steak, and one of the drop downs is going to say, how well done do I want the steak? Do I want it rare or well or medium, or what do I want? And the other one's going to be, how thick is the steak? And then I'm going to do some fake little calculation and say, that's how long you should cook the steak. So here is my spinner. I'm choosing a medium, and then I'm choosing how thick is my steak, 1 1/4, and then I'm saying calculate. This is cook it for 6.5 minutes. And don't trust me on that. That's just some little doodah calculation for the sake of it. If I change it to well, then it clears it out. If I change the thickness of the steak, it clears it out. Okay. So that's what we are doing here. Let's make that a little. Okay, so here's the design. So I had a text view that I called doneness. I don't know, I don't have a good word for that, but how well done you want your steak. I have it constrained. I'm in a constraint layout, so I have to constrain it horizontally and vertically. I have a text size that's a little bit big, so that's why it was sort of big font. Here is something that is somewhat newish. They wanted, the spinner is something that the user interacts with, and then if somebody who was visually impaired wanted to use your app, then they should know what choices they're making in that spinner. And so they'll want to know that it has something to do with the doneness. And so one way to do that is to say that this text view, which was labeling the spinner, you in Android. So visually, for a person who can see well, they can see that this label is right above the spinner, and so that it is labeling that spinner. But for the visually impaired person, this makes that connection that this label is in reference to that spinner. So that will give some idea to a user what the spinner, what choices are being made there. Sorry. So that is the text view. Here is the spinner. Remember that in XML, we have things that have opens and closes, and we have singletons. A spinner is a singleton. So this, I said it's like a select in JavaScript and HTML, but here's a way in which it's different. And a select in HTML has an open and a close, and you can put the options in design in between. That is not the case in a spinner. In here, the spinner is a singleton. It's just like this. And then we're going to use code to load up the options. Here's the next label, the next text view. It is for the thickness. So it's text as thickness. It's the label for the spinner of thickness. And then down here, this reference to the doneness is the constraint layout. It's about the positioning of it. Then here's the actual spinner for the thickness. Again, it's a singleton. Then here's a button. So I'm going to, when they've chosen the doneness and they've chosen the thickness, then they're going to hit a button and I'm going to do my calculation. This is the button to cause the calculation. And then here's a text view for displaying the answer. So that is the layout. Questions on the layout? Okay. So I'll go over to main. My strings, my doneness levels are going to be here in this string, but my thicknesses are here as an array. So I'm going to use two different methods for loading my spinners. One from a resource array and one from what I'll call a code array. Okay. Here's the usual stuff, connecting interface to code version. So for the button, for the result, for the spinner doneness and the spinner for thickness. When you're working with spinners, the thing that helps you populate them is known as an array adapter. The first one is the doneness, and the doneness I am working with the resource array. So I'm going to make an array adapter. So that's why I have this little AA here. I'm announcing to myself that it's an array adapter. And then I go to the array adapter. That's a thing that Android Kotlin knows about. I probably have to import it. It's probably up here in the imports. There's array adapter, yes. Okay. And this time I'm getting the options for my spinner from a resource. So I say create from resource. I have a context, which is this, but you might say application context or base context. Here is the array from the resources. R stands for the resources. We're used to being RID, but this is not an ID, but we're getting it from the arrays, which is down here in the values, the strings. And the name of it was doneness. So that's that array of rare, and medium, etc. And then this is what the spinner looks like, and this just keeps it pretty simple to keep it just that word. So you just sort of see the words rare when you go into the spinner, and you see what the options are. They'll look quite simple, just simple names. There are fancier things that one can do here. I'm just starting exercise, keep it simple. And then once you've made the array, then you associate the array adapter as the adapter of your particular spinner, and that sort of populates it for you. And then we want the event of the spinner. There are two events, or you give a listener of anything I might be doing with my spinner. I have a listener. And one of them is when you are changing your choice. And then there's this weird one that is like, if nothing's chosen, and you have to have it, but I never do anything with it. So I leave it blank. What I'm doing this is what happens, this is what gets called if they're choosing something. I'm toasting out what they chose just to show that I have access to that information. And then I am clearing out my results. So my calculation of how long to cook the steak is based on their choices, both of the doneness and of the thickness. And if they're changing the doneness, then my calculation changes and I'm clearing out my result, and I'm going to make them hit the button again. It would be possible for me to just redo the calculation. So that's just a different user choice. You can have the computer, have your app do the calculation here. I'm just having it clear out the answer, and I'm going to force them to click the button again. Here's my second array adapter, my second spinner. And this one I'm going to use from a code array. So again, you still use an array adapter. It has 3 arguments. This is the first one. This time now, the layout is the second argument, and the array you're using, and this is a code array this time, is the third thing. So there's no dot from up there. There was create from resources up above. That's gone because I'm not going to a resource, I'm going from code. And then there's a sort of a rearrangement here in the order of the arguments. Still the context first, but the layout and then the array. And you see that occurs when you have multiple ways of doing things. They sort of change the signature so that they can have different versions of the same thing, and you can tell one from the other by their different signatures. So they sort of rearranged like the order of the layout and the array, and that's sort of on purpose so that they could have, sort of more clearly different signatures. Okay, but this is the setup for working with the array. So when I give you something to do, you make up your decision. Am I going to work with a resource array, or am I going to work with a code array? And then you have to make sure, again, you're probably going to copy my code and then make it your own. Make sure you copy the right one. If you're going to work from a code array, copy this one. If you're going to work from a resource array, copy the higher one. Okay, so but then they both work with the array adapter. So use the array adapter as the adapter for the spinner, and then that populates it. Here is my spinner events. If they change which one is selected, then I can display some information about which one was selected. I'm just toasting that out for fun to show you I have access to that information. And then I'm just clearing out my answer. Here's my button. When they click the button, I find what they selected based on, I'm using an ID. So I have access to an ID. I also have access to an item. So for the doneness, that was words, and I have some calculation to do, so I don't want words. So I'm getting the sort of an index out of it, an ID, and then I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so I can get some number out of there. The thickness, they were numbers, so I want to get the number. So this one I'm getting an item ID. Here I'm getting a selected item. So I'm getting slightly different things out of my spinners. And then I have to turn it into a string and then turn it into a number. So it's just that weird casting and then recasting kind of a thing to turn something into a string and then into a number. Okay, and then I do some kind of weird little calculation, which again, don't go burning your stake based on my calculation. It's just a pretend exercise. And then I'm displaying the result. Any questions? So you can access the information from your spinners on a different event. And you can also access information about your spinners based on the event of the spinner itself. Okay. One more time, any questions? I'm going to throw an image. I'm not going to code the image. I'm just going to add the image sort of in design, but I'm going to, this is our first go at having an image. So I'm going to throw in a little image down here. And I have an image here. And save the link as okay. So I'll put it in downloads. I have an image. Okay. Now, the first thing to know about images, I'm going to put an image as a resource. And so I'm going to have it similar to where the layout is and where that strings XML was. But the first thing to know about resources, there. One thing, the resources, there's a naming scheme in Android, and it is, you can have small letters, no capital letters. So we don't have any capital letters over here. We can have small letters, we can have numbers, we can have underscores, and then that's pretty much it. Don't start with them, so you should start with a letter. I think you might be able to start with an underscore. You should not start with a number. You can start with a letter. It should be a small letter, no spaces. And so this is a bad name. I have a space there. I have some parentheses. I have capital letters. So I'm going to rename this first thing and get put it in a proper naming scheme. So stake, small s, doneness, small d, underscores are okay. I'm going to get rid of these parentheses and the one. The one would be all right, but and no spaces. So here is a properly named image file that I can now use as a resource in an Android. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come over here. Images go in what's called drawable, and I'm going to paste that there. And I'm going to say okay and okay. So now I have stake doneness.jpg in my drawable folder in my resources. So this is now a resource available to us in this Android project. Okay, and now I'm going to go to the layout, and I'm going to go to the design of the layout, and I want an image view. So I'm going to bring down an image view. And it's asking me, do I know what image I want? And I want this doneness image. And I'm going to squeeze it a little bit. Oh, what the hell did I just do? Let me hit undo. I don't know what I just did. Yeah. I just made a mess of everything. What the hell? All right, let me see if I can do this. All right, so I'm gonna shrink this up a little bit. Come on. There we go. Now I'm in a constraint layout, so I just put something on the page. It's not what they call WYSIWYG. It's not what you see is what you get. It's things and are unconstrained are going to be thrown up to the top left. So I don't want that, so I need to constrain it. So I'm going to put it under my display, maybe with a little space, so it's not right under, and I'm going to put it to the container. Maybe make that innate. I'm going to, if I connect it to both sides of the container, it's going to sort of center it. And then I'm also going to constrain it to the bottom. I only need two constraints. I only need to constrain it once horizontally, once vertically. I'm sort of giving it a lot of constraints, but that's sort of going to sort of stick it in the middle. And let's see, let's save and see how we're doing. And there it is. Might be a little bit off screen. So let me see if I can fix that. Let me give this 8 and that 8. I wanted 8s all around. Let me see if that helped or didn't help. That it's still a little bit off screen. So let me see. This is one thing I always have to play with and just sort of do a trial and error. How the image appears within the image view is this thing called scale type. And I'm going to try fit center to try to fit it to the box, but put it in the center of the box. Let me make sure it's saved. And let me run it. What you first see is my running from this morning. And it's still sort of off the page. That's the old one. As I say, I usually just end up center inside. Let's try center inside, and then I'll give up. Still not sort of squeezing the image as much as I would like. So one thing I can do is just come over to the design, and I can go in myself and make it smaller. Right now it's sort of expanding the image view to fit, I think, the image, and I want it to work the other way around. And I thought that was fit, but it didn't seem to be working for me. One more try. And then I'm going to give up and worry about it another day. Still not working very well for me, so never mind, I will. What did we learn is that I'm not good with the scale view, but what else did we learn? That drawables go in, or images go in drawable, in resources. There's an important naming scheme, and you work with the image view. Now, the easy way for me to deal with this is to just come up to the, oh, maybe that's what it is. Maybe somehow it ended up with a specific layout, width, and height. And let me switch it to wrap content. Maybe that's the problem. Save, and then that's even more ridiculous now. One more try, and then I give up. Keep saying I'm going to give up, and then I don't give up. No, my image is way too big. So one of these will make it fit to the box rather than expand the box to fit the image. And I've got them backwards, and I don't want to have you watch me spin my wheels. So I'm gonna stop. Before I stop recording, any questions for the recording? Anything, any questions you want to ask me with my answer recorded? Take that as a no. So stop recording.